So he traveled to Washington, D.C., just to board Air Force One to fly to South Carolina. And in many ways, just for that photo op. If you were advising the Biden family 2 days after the Trump raid, wouldn't you have been like, hey, maybe Hunter can meet us in South Carolina? Like, maybe he doesn't need to be boarding Air Force One and drawing attention to I mean, it just is so cocky and arrogant.
But I think the brazenness,
infuriating.
is part of the appeal. I mean, I think this is true of the fact that Nancy Pelosi's husband and his trading history is out there for all to see. And they say, what are you going to do about it?
I don't really know that very many people have thought through the absurdity of what a president being put in prison would look like, given the fact that their Secret Service detail would have to be with them as well. This sounds like a really ridiculous sitcom pitch. Like, I can see, so the president goes to prison, but he has his security detail that goes with him as well. It is all kind of laughably absurd. And speaking of prison, I just want to talk about the Hunter Biden optics for a moment, okay? We know the FBI has had the Hunter Biden laptop for multiple years now. We know, and we're going to talk with Miranda Devine in the third hour of this program, New York Post writer who broke much of the laptop story and also wrote Laptop from Hell, all about the Hunter Biden laptop. There are bevies of felonies that are easy to be applied and charged to Hunter Biden. Buck, 2 days after the FBI had a raid on Mar-a-Lago and President Trump's private residence, had agents walking through Melania Trump's private closet, looking at her dresses, underwear drawers. I mean, this is weird stuff, right? Hunter Biden right now, to my understanding, lives like he has some boy toy who's paying for him to live in a Malibu mansion out in California. Some Hollywood lawyer is like a big fan of Hunter Biden and so is paying for him to continue to live there. He flew evidently all the way across the country to Washington, D.C. so that he could board Air Force One with his dad to fly to South Carolina. And it just feels like such a slap in the face to the American public and also a middle finger. If you saw that footage of Biden walking up the ramp, thankfully he didn't fall this time, to Air Force One, Hunter was there alongside of him as they entered Air Force One. That means Hunter had to fly from his usual home in California to Washington, D.C., just so we could have the photo op of the two of them walking onto Air Force One so they could go down to South Carolina. And I just want you to think about this. Wherever you live, maybe you go on vacation with your parents or your family. How often would you travel to meet them so that you could fly together to a different destination? It just feels like such a middle finger to the American public for Hunter Biden to travel to Washington, D.C. so that he could travel with his dad to South Carolina. Just so basically we can see him get on Air Force One and stick that middle finger in the American face, but also the FBI's face, the Department of Justice. Hey, I'm Hunter Biden. I committed so many felonies, even I can't keep up with them. All on video, all clear as day. And my dad is so powerful, you're not going to do anything to me. We can raid the former president's private home 2 days beforehand, and I'm just going to come into town, gallivant up the stairs to get on Air Force One. Buck, it really pisses me off.
You see, Paul Pelosi Jr. traveled with Nancy to Taiwan.
Of course he did.
Of course. Now, look, she says, is that within the rules? It's within the rules. But given the Pelosi and Biden and name a really powerful Democrat tendency to use government resources for the enrichment of their families, the enjoyment of their families. And didn't Christopher Wray also just take a private jet up to the Adirondacks? A lot of people are surprised to find out. FBI director, attorney general, private jets, folks, taxpayer funded private jets meant for official travel. But I can tell you, I had friends in the federal government who not speaking personally here, we're experts in the boondoggle. There are so many ways that you can use those resources as long as you have a pretext for why I have to go, oh, yes, I must give a briefing in the south of France next week. This is what ends up happening.
Fuel up the private jet.
So the people that are telling you, tighten up your belt. So what if eggs are 100% more than they were a year ago? So what if inflation's 8.5%? It's fine. Don't worry about it. Biden's doing a great job. They get to fly around private courtesy of the taxpayer. Not even on their own dime.
You don't have kids yet. But they are going to South Carolina for a family vacation. And he lives in California. It's not like he lives in Washington, D.C. So he traveled to Washington, D.C. just to board Air Force One to fly to South Carolina. And in many ways, just for that photo op, if you were advising the Biden family 2 days after the Trump parade, wouldn't you have been like, hey, maybe Hunter can meet us in South Carolina? Like, maybe he doesn't need to be boarding Air Force One and drawing attention to it just is so cocky and arrogant.
But I think the brazenness is part of the appeal. I mean, I think this is true of the fact that Nancy Pelosi's husband and his trading history is out there for all to see. And they say, what are you going to do about it? Hunter Biden was paid millions of dollars. I mean, Hunter Biden is somebody who you would not, let's be honest, you would not feel comfortable leaving him in charge of your cats for a week, right? You'd be like, I don't know what's I'm going to come back. Those cats will not have eaten. They'll be missing all their fur, bad thing. They'll be, I don't know what's going on with Hunter and the cats. You would not trust him, but you'd pay him millions of dollars to advise you on international business transactions. This is all known, and we're just supposed to accept this, meaning that the people who are in charge of elevating public corruption at the New York Times and the people at CNN and MSNBC who tell you they care so much about good governance, they just act like this is totally normal. Nothing to see here. And I still remember, because I was a frequent guest at the Trump, not really staying there, but at the Trump bar, a Trump hotel in D.C. That's the one place we could gather together and not have psycho libs with blue hair throwing things at us. That they wrote articles about how foreign diplomats at the bar were buying Trump's foreign policy. If you're paying for a Guinness at the Trump hotel and you happen to be from Finland, it's a violation of the emoluments clause. I mean, they were doing this. They actually tabulated all the bar tabs. They tabulated all the cheeseburgers. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, will anybody even mention that what I just mentioned about Hunter traveling all the way across the country so that he could board Air Force One in D.C. to fly somewhere else? And again, just think about it in the context of your own family vacations. Unless your parents are so unable to travel that you have to assist them, which certainly even Joe Biden's got dementia. I mean, he's got a whole staff of people to get him down to South Carolina. Unless that is a real issue, you would never travel to where your parents are when you're going to a different place on vacation. It's just
they don't care, man. I mean, this is the problem is they don't get held to account. So after a while, it becomes rational. The cost benefit analysis of caring about their hypocrisy, of caring about their the way that they're abusing the public trust, whether it's legal or not, doesn't matter. I mean, we've been talking a lot about the judge, for example, who signed off on the Trump warrant. And so much of the legal process is concerned with the appearance of impropriety. All recusals are really about, I'm using my judgment as a judge to say I shouldn't weigh in on this because I can't be impartial. The judge who signed off on the warrant to go do the raid on Mar-a-Lago has a lot. I mean, first of all, there's the Epstein defense thing. But I know defense attorneys will say you defend whoever. But, I mean, you don't actually have to defend anybody. There's public defenders.
And the part that's particularly noxious, I would say, about the Epstein connection is he was affiliated with, in some way, the office that investigated Epstein in South Florida and led to that very light prosecution agreement.
I'm going to say this. There's never been, Clay, about the light prosecution, there's really never been an explanation for why. Andy McCarthy told me this years ago. There is no such thing in prosecutorial conduct as a promise to not prosecute as yet unnamed co-conspirators, which is essentially
you
a
don't
get
know
out
the
of
full story. Yeah.
Which is what they gave Jeffrey Epstein as part of his federal plea agreement. We're going to make this go away. And also anyone else who gets dragged into this in the future cannot be the subject of federal charges. I asked Andy, I mean, I've never seen that before. He'd never seen that before.
Which is why there's some discussion that Epstein may have been an agent, right? That he may have been in some way cooperating with someone in the United States government in order to get that kind of lenient treatment.
He was running a massive surveillance and blackmail operation based on the infrastructure of the properties that he had. He had the wealthiest and most influential people in the world visiting him. And if you want to see something really crazy for the FBI's integrity and believability, go look at how they showed up at his New York residence that was gifted to him by Les Wexner, which is worth about $80 million. I'm sure that, people can feel very generous. I've never heard of anyone feeling so generous to a friend they gave him an $80 million mansion, just cuz. Sounds like maybe there was something else going on there. But the FBI showed up at the home of Epstein at one point, and then said that and they were going to get all these tapes, surveillance tapes. You know what happened? The lawyers for Epstein were like, no, hold on, we'll separate it for you. The FBI left the premises and came back, and the tapes were lost. This is all a matter of court record. Sorry, little whoopsie there. Couldn't find what was on those tapes.